The morning sun cast long shadows across the quiet street as William adjusted his tie one final time before reaching for the brass door handle. He had been expecting this visit for weeks, ever since the mysterious letter arrived with the royal seal. Kate stood behind him, her hand gently resting on his shoulder, both of them unaware that their lives were about to change forever. The knock had come precisely at 9 o'clock, just as the letter had promised. William could feel his heart racing as he turned the handle, wondering what news could be so urgent that it required a personal visit from the palace officials. Kate squeezed his shoulder reassuringly, her own anxiety carefully hidden behind a brave smile. As the door swung open, William was surprised to see not one but 3 figures standing on their doorstep. The first was a tall, distinguished gentleman in a dark suit whom William recognized as the Queen's private secretary. Behind him stood a woman in formal attire holding a leather briefcase, and beside her, an elderly man whose face seemed vaguely familiar, but whose identity escaped William in that moment of confusion. The secretary stepped forward with a solemn expression that immediately set William on edge. There was something in the man's eyes that spoke of grave news, the kind that changes everything in an instant. Kate moved closer to William, sensing the weight of whatever was about to be revealed. Without any pleasantries, the secretary spoke, in measured tones about matters concerning the royal succession, using formal language that seemed to dance around the actual reason for their visit. William listened carefully, trying to piece together the implications of what was being said, while Kate remained silent but alert beside him. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward and began to explain legal documents that would need to be signed, speaking of responsibilities and duties that William had never imagined would fall to him. Her words seemed to echo in the hallway as the reality of the situation began to dawn on both William and Kate. The elderly man, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up with a voice that carried decades of experience in royal protocol. His words were carefully chosen, but the emotional weight behind them was unmistakable. He spoke of legacy, of duty, and of the unexpected turns that life sometimes takes. William felt the ground shifting beneath his feet as he processed the information being shared with him. The implications were staggering, affecting not just his own future but Kate's as well, and the life they had carefully built together. Kate's grip on his arm tightened as she too began to understand the magnitude of what they were hearing. The secretary produced a sealed envelope from his jacket pocket, explaining that it contained additional details that required immediate attention. As William took the envelope, his hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm facade he was trying to maintain for Kate's sake. The morning that had started like any other was transforming into something that would be remembered forever. The 3 visitors continued to speak in hushed, respectful tones about procedures that would need to be followed, and decisions that would need to be made quickly. William glanced at Kate, seeing his own mixture of shock and uncertainty reflected in her eyes. They had always known their lives were different from most people's, but this news was pushing them into territory they had never expected to navigate, at least not so soon. The weight of royal tradition and expectation seemed to settle on William's shoulders like a heavy cloak as the visitors continued their explanation. Every word spoken seemed to carry the weight of history, of centuries of protocol and ceremony that would now become an integral part of their daily existence. Kate remained composed, though William could see the questions forming in her mind, the same questions that were racing through his own thoughts. The future they had planned, the simple moments they had treasured, would now be viewed through an entirely different lens. As the visitors concluded their initial explanation, they made it clear that time was of the essence. Decisions would need to be made, arrangements would need to be put in place, and their private life would soon become a matter of public interest in ways they had never fully anticipated. William invited the 3 visitors into their sitting room, his mind still reeling from the initial revelation. Kate busied herself with preparing tea, her hands moving automatically through the familiar motions, while her thoughts raced with the implications of what they had just learned. The normalcy of the domestic task felt surreal against the backdrop of such momentous news. The elderly man, who had finally introduced himself as Lord Chamberlain, settled into the armchair by the window and began to explain the historical precedent for their situation. His words painted a picture of royal duty that stretched back generations, of sacrifices made by those who came before them, and of the weight of responsibility that was now being passed to William and Kate. As the secretary opened his briefcase and spread documents across their coffee table, William found himself staring at official papers that would formalize his new role in the royal hierarchy. The legal language was dense and formal, but the meaning was crystal clear. His life as he knew it was ending, and a new chapter filled with unprecedented responsibility was beginning. Kate returned with the tea service, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. She poured with steady hands, though William noticed the slight pause she made when the Lord Chamberlain addressed her directly about her own role in the unfolding situation. The weight of expectation was settling on her shoulders as well, and William felt a surge of protectiveness toward his wife. The woman with the briefcase, who had introduced herself as the Queen's legal advisor, began outlining the immediate changes that would need to take place in their daily routine. Security arrangements would be enhanced, their public appearances would be carefully coordinated, and their privacy would become a precious commodity that would need to be fiercely protected. William listened as details were discussed about residences, staff assignments, and the complex web of protocol that would now govern their every public move. The freedom they had enjoyed to move about their community, to make spontaneous decisions about their time and activities, would now be subject to careful planning and security considerations. The Lord Chamberlain spoke with evident emotion about the burden of royal duty, acknowledging that it was never easy to accept such responsibility, especially when it came earlier than expected. His words carried the weight of personal experience, and both William and Kate found themselves drawn to his understanding of their situation. Kate asked her first direct question about how their current charitable work would be affected by these changes. Her voice was steady, but William could hear the underlying concern about causes that were close to her heart. The advisor's response was both reassuring and cautionary, explaining how their platform would actually expand their ability to help, while also noting the increased scrutiny that would accompany their efforts. As the morning progressed, the visitors outlined a timeline for the transition that seemed to accelerate with each passing minute. Public announcements would need to be carefully coordinated, family members would need to be informed, and the media would require managing with the utmost care and precision. William found himself thinking about their children, about how this change would affect their young lives and the childhood experiences he had hoped to provide for them. The balance between royal duty and family life had always been delicate, but now it would require even more careful navigation. The secretary presented a schedule of meetings and briefings that would begin immediately, designed to prepare them, both for the increased responsibilities they would soon shoulder. Constitutional experts, protocol specialists, and security advisors would all play roles in their education about their new positions. Kate inquired about the support they could expect during this transition period, her practical nature showing through despite the overwhelming nature of the situation. The response was thorough, outlining a network of advisors, staff members, and experienced royal family members who would guide them through the adjustment. The legal advisor explained the constitutional significance of William's new role, how it would affect the line of succession, and the ceremonial duties that would become regular parts of their calendar. Each responsibility seemed to add another layer to the complexity of their new life. As the visitors prepared to leave, they emphasized the confidential nature of much of what had been discussed until official announcements could be made. The weight of keeping such significant news private while processing its implications would be yet another challenge William and Kate would need to navigate together in the coming days. After the visitors departed, William and Kate stood in their hallway, surrounded by the scattered remnants of their former life. The official documents lay on the coffee table like artifacts from a different world, while the silence between them spoke volumes about the magnitude of what they had just experienced. Kate was the first to break the silence, her voice barely above a whisper as she asked William if he truly understood what had just happened to them. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them had fully processed. William reached for her hand, finding comfort in the familiar warmth of her touch even as everything else in their world seemed to be shifting. They moved to their kitchen, seeking the comfort of familiar surroundings while their minds struggled to absorb the morning's revelations. Kate put the kettle on again, more from habit than desire for tea, while William stared out the window at their garden, wondering how long it would be before even this simple pleasure would require security clearance. The phone began ringing almost immediately, as if the outside world could sense that something significant had occurred. William let it go to voicemail, knowing that once they began fielding calls about their new situation, there would be no stopping the avalanche of attention that would follow. Kate sat down at their kitchen table, the same table where they had shared countless meals and conversations about their future together. Now those conversations would need to take on an entirely different character, shaped by responsibilities and expectations they had never anticipated having to shoulder. William joined her at the table, and they began to discuss the immediate practical considerations. Their children would need to be told, though the visitors had stressed the importance of controlling that information until official announcements were made. The conversation would require careful thought about timing and approach. The weight of their new reality became more apparent as they discussed how their daily routines would change. The simple freedom to take walks in their neighborhood, to shop for groceries together, or to attend local events would now be filtered through security concerns and public relations considerations. Kate expressed her concerns about maintaining some sense of normalcy for their children. Even as their world was about to become decidedly abnormal, William shared her worry, remembering his own childhood experiences with public attention and wanting to shield his children from the more intrusive aspects of royal life for as long as possible. They talked about their work, their charitable commitments, and the various projects they had been passionate about. While some would need to be modified or handed over to others, they began to see how their new platform might actually allow them to make an even greater impact on causes they cared about. The afternoon brought a new wave of official visitors, including security personnel, who began conducting an assessment of their home and grounds. William watched as strangers walked through their private spaces, making notes about modifications that would need to be made for their protection and privacy. Kate found herself in conversation with a protocol expert who had been sent to begin their education about royal procedures and expectations. The woman was kind but thorough, explaining how their public appearances would be choreographed and how their words would be carefully analyzed by media and constitutional experts alike. As an evening approached, William and Kate finally had a few moments alone together. They stood in their living room, looking at the space that had been their sanctuary but would soon be subject to security modifications and official oversight. The intimacy they had always treasured would now need to be protected more carefully than ever. Kate asked William about his fears, and he admitted that he was most concerned about losing the authentic connection they had built with the people they served. The increased formality and protocol might create distance where there had once been genuine warmth and accessibility. William, in turn, asked Kate about her worries, and she spoke about the challenge of raising their children with strong values, while they would be surrounded by privilege and public attention. She wanted them to remain grounded and connected to the experiences of ordinary people. They discussed the support system they would need to build around themselves, recognizing that they would be relying on advisors and staff members in ways they never had before. The challenge would be maintaining their own judgment and values while accepting guidance from those with more experience in royal protocol. As night fell, they realized that this was likely their last evening of relative privacy and normalcy. Tomorrow would bring briefings, meetings, and the beginning of their preparation for a very public role that would define the rest of their lives together. The next morning arrived with a flurry of activity that would have been unimaginable just days earlier. William woke to find security personnel already positioned around their property, and Kate discovered that their phone had been replaced with a secure communication device during the night. The transformation of their private world into something resembling a command center had begun in earnest. Their children's reaction to the carefully explained changes in their family situation brought both William and Kate to the edge of tears. The innocence of their questions about why strangers were now living in their garden shed and whether they would still be allowed to play with their neighborhood friends highlighted the profound impact this transition would have on every aspect of their family life. Kate found herself struggling with the loss of spontaneity that had always characterized their family time together. Simple activities like taking the children to the park or visiting the local library would now require advanced planning, security sweeps, and coordination with multiple agencies. The freedom to be an ordinary family was slipping away with each passing hour. The morning brought their first formal briefing session, conducted by a team of constitutional experts and royal historians. William and Kate sat in their own living room, now rearranged to accommodate the needs of official business, listening to detailed explanations of precedents and protocols that would guide their new public role. Kate asked pointed questions about maintaining their connection to the charitable organizations they had supported as private citizens. The answers were complex, involving legal considerations about endorsements and the political implications of royal patronage. What had once been straightforward expressions of personal values would now be filtered through layers of constitutional review. William struggled with the realization that his words would carry far more weight than they ever had before, and that casual comments could be interpreted as official royal positions on complex issues. The responsibility of representing not just his own views but the dignity of the institution was becoming more apparent with each explanation. Their first public appearance as members of the senior royal family was scheduled for the following week, and the preparation required was staggering. Speechwriters, fashion consultants, protocol experts, and media advisors would all play roles in preparing them for what would essentially be their debut in their new roles. Kate expressed frustration about the level of scrutiny that would now be applied to her appearance, her words, and even her facial expressions during public events. The natural warmth and authenticity that had always been her strengths would now need to be carefully modulated to meet royal expectations. The couple spent the afternoon reviewing security protocols that would govern their movements for the rest of their lives. The detail was overwhelming, covering everything from advance teams that would inspect every location they visited to emergency procedures that anticipated threats they had never considered. William found himself thinking about the ordinary moments he would miss, the ability to drive himself to appointments, to browse in bookshops without advance notice, or to have private conversations in public spaces without worrying about being overheard or photographed. Their evening meal was interrupted by a call informing them that media speculation about changes in their status was beginning to appear in various outlets. The pressure to make official announcements was mounting, which meant their period of private adjustment was coming to an end sooner than they had hoped. Kate spoke with her own mother that evening, explaining as much as she was permitted to share about the changes coming to their family. The conversation was emotional, as both women understood that Kate's role as a daughter and private citizen was being fundamentally altered by circumstances beyond their control. William had a similar conversation with close friends who had been part of their inner circle for years, explaining that their relationships would necessarily change, not through choice but through the requirements of their new position, was one of the most difficult aspects of their transition. As they prepared for bed, William and Kate realized that their private conversations would now need to be more carefully guarded than ever. The sanctuary of their bedroom might be one of the few places where they could speak freely about their concerns and fears without worrying about the implications of their words. They held each other closer that night, understanding that while their love for each other remained unchanged, the context in which they would express and nurture that love was being transformed in ways they were still learning to comprehend. The weight of their new responsibilities seemed to press down on them even in sleep, as both William and Kate found. Their dreams filled with images of crowds, ceremonies, and the faces of people whose expectations they would now be required to meet for the rest of their public lives. The morning of their first official public engagement arrived gray and overcast, matching the somber mood that had settled over William and Kate during their final preparations. They stood before the mirror in their bedroom, adjusting formal attire that felt both familiar and foreign, knowing that this appearance would mark the end of their private lives and the beginning of their very public service. Kate's hands trembled slightly as she fastened her jewelry, pieces that carried historical significance she was still learning to understand. Each element of her appearance had been carefully chosen by advisors, from the color of her dress to the style of her hair, all designed to send appropriate messages to various audiences who would analyze every detail. William struggled with his own reflection, seeing not just himself but the weight of generations of royal service that would now rest on his shoulders. The formal military decorations he wore carried stories of service and sacrifice that he was still learning to honor appropriately in his new role. Their children's goodbye that morning was particularly poignant, as both William and Kate understood that when they returned home, they would be different people in the eyes of the world, even if their love for their family remained unchanged. The innocence in their children's wishes for good luck highlighted how much their young lives would also be affected by this transformation. The drive to their first engagement was conducted in official vehicles with security escorts, replacing the casual car rides they had always enjoyed together. Kate looked out the window at ordinary people going about their daily lives and felt a profound sense of loss for the simplicity they were leaving behind. At the venue, William and Kate were briefed one final time about the people they would meet, the protocol they should follow, and the messages their presence was intended to convey. Every handshake, every conversation, every photograph would be analyzed and interpreted by media outlets around the world. Their entrance into the public space marked the moment when their private transition became a public reality. The assembled crowd, media representatives and officials all recognized the significance of this appearance, and William and Kate felt the weight of hundreds of eyes evaluating their every movement. Kate's first public words in her new role were carefully considered, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to serve while acknowledging the responsibility they both felt. Her voice remained steady despite the magnitude of the moment, though William could see the emotion she was working to control. William found himself drawing on reserves of strength he hadn't known he possessed as he engaged with various dignitaries and community leaders. Each conversation required him to balance personal warmth with official protocol, a skill he was still developing under the most public circumstances possible. The event included moments of genuine connection with members of the public who had gathered to witness their first official appearance. These interactions reminded both William and Kate why they had accepted this role despite its personal cost, as they saw the positive impact their presence could have on people's lives. Photographers captured every moment of their appearance, and William realized that these images would become historical documents, studied and referenced for generations to come. The pressure of knowing that their expressions and gestures would be preserved and analyzed indefinitely was unlike anything they had experienced before. Kate struggled with the emotional weight of representing not just herself, but the institution of the monarchy and the expectations of millions of people, the responsibility of never appearing to have an off moment, of always embodying dignity and service was more challenging than she had anticipated. As the event concluded, William and Kate were approached by elderly citizens who shared stories of their own service and sacrifice during previous generations. These conversations provided context for their new role and helped them understand the continuity they were joining and the legacy they would be expected to maintain. Their final moments at the venue were spent with young people who looked to them as examples and role models. Kate found herself deeply moved by their enthusiasm and hope, recognizing that her actions and words would help shape their understanding of service and duty. The return journey to their home was conducted in relative silence, as both William and Kate processed the magnitude of what they had just experienced. They had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return, and the reality of their new life was beginning to settle over them like a permanent change in the weather. Back at home, they found their children eager to hear about their day, asking innocent questions about the people they had met and the places they had seen. Sharing these experiences while protecting their children's innocence required a delicate balance that would become a constant part of their new reality. As evening fell, William and Kate sat together in their garden, one of the few spaces that still felt entirely their own. They spoke quietly about the day's experiences, sharing their fears and hopes while trying to process the enormity of the commitment they had just publicly made. 3 months had passed since that life-changing morning when William first opened the door to their new reality. As they sat together in their renovated study, now equipped with secure communication systems and official meeting spaces, both William and Kate reflected on how completely their world had been transformed by circumstances beyond their control. Kate had developed a new strength that surprised even herself, finding ways to maintain her authentic connection with people while navigating the complex requirements of royal protocol. Her charitable work had expanded exponentially, allowing her to impact causes she cared about on a scale she had never imagined possible. though always within carefully defined constitutional boundaries. William discovered that the weight of his new responsibilities had brought out leadership qualities he hadn't fully recognized in himself. The daily briefings, official meetings, and ceremonial duties that had initially seemed overwhelming had become part of a routine that was beginning to feel natural, though never ordinary. Their children had adapted to their changed circumstances with the resilience that often surprises adults. The security measures that had initially seemed intrusive were now simply part of their family's daily life, though William and Kate worked constantly to maintain spaces where childhood could flourish without the weight of public expectation. The couple had learned to treasure private moments together more intensely than ever before. Their evening conversations in their bedroom had become sacred time when they could share their genuine thoughts and feelings without the filters required in all their other interactions. Kate often found herself thinking about the woman she had been before that morning when everything changed. While she mourned the loss of anonymity and spontaneity, she had discovered a sense of purpose that made the sacrifice feel worthwhile, particularly when she witnessed the direct impact of her public platform on important social issues. William had struggled more with the loss of privacy, finding it difficult to adjust to the constant awareness that his words and actions were being observed and interpreted by others. However, he had also found deep satisfaction in his ability to represent values and causes that had always been important to him, now with a platform that could create real change. Their relationship had been tested by the pressures of their new role, but they had emerged stronger and more united than ever. The shared experience of navigating such a profound life change had deepened their understanding of each other and reinforced their commitment to facing whatever challenges lay ahead. As a team, the public had responded to their new roles with warmth and support that often moved both William and Kate to tears during private moments. Letters from citizens expressing gratitude for their service, stories from people whose lives had been touched by their charitable work, and the evident affection shown during public engagements had helped them understand the positive impact they could have. As they prepared for bed on this particular evening, William and Kate acknowledged to each other that while they still missed aspects of their former life, they had found meaning and purpose in their new roles that had surprised them both. The sacrifice of privacy and spontaneity had been significant, but the opportunity to serve their community and country felt like a worthy exchange. Kate brushed her hair in front of the same mirror where she had prepared for their first official engagement, noting how much more confident she appeared now, how the initial fear in her eyes had been replaced by determination and grace. The woman looking back at her was still recognizably herself, but strengthened by months of rising to meet unexpected challenges. William stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the security lights that now illuminated their grounds, reflecting on how different his view had become both literally and figuratively. The protection that surrounded them was a constant reminder of their changed status, but also of the responsibility they carried to represent something larger than themselves. Their final conversation of the day touched on their children's future, how their new circumstances would shape the young lives they were responsible for protecting and nurturing. Both parents were committed to ensuring that privilege would be balanced with service, and that their children would understand both the benefits and the burdens that came with their family's unique position. As they settled into sleep, William reached for Kate's hand in the darkness, a gesture that had become even more meaningful since their world had changed so dramatically. Whatever challenges tomorrow would bring, they would face them together, drawing strength from their love and their shared commitment to honoring the trust that had been placed in them. The last thing Kate thought about before sleep was the moment when William had first opened that door, how neither of them could have imagined the journey that would follow, and how grateful she was that they had been able to navigate it together, emerging not just intact, but somehow stronger and more purposeful than they had been before their lives were forever altered.